The first thing I noticed wasn't the sterile smell of disinfectant or the rhythmic beeping of machines. It was the absence. A hollowness in my abdomen that felt like someone had scooped out pieces of me with a melon baller. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I'm a trauma surgeon at St. Michael's Medical Center in Denver. Or rather, I was. Before my husband Marcus tried to sell my organs on the black market while I lay unconscious in bed 314. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent 15 years of my life saving others, only to nearly lose mine to the person who promised to love and protect me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the moment my perfect life began its catastrophic unraveling. It was a Tuesday in March when the skiing accident happened. Marcus and I had driven up to Vail for what he called a much-needed getaway. I should have seen the signs then, his insistence on the expensive resort despite our mounting medical school debt, his nervous energy, the way he kept checking his phone every few minutes. "Come on, Elena," he'd laughed, pulling me toward the expert slope despite my protests. "Live a little. You're always so careful, so controlled. Sometimes you have to take risks." The last thing I remembered was the sound of his laughter echoing across the mountain as I lost my balance on a patch of ice. Then nothing but darkness for 3 weeks. When I finally opened my eyes in the ICU, Marcus was there. His face was a mask of concern, his eyes red-rimmed as if he'd been crying. For a moment, I felt a surge of love for this man who'd obviously been suffering alongside me. "Elena, thank God," he whispered, gripping my hand. "I thought I'd lost you." Dr. Patricia Chen, my colleague and friend, appeared at his shoulder. Her expression was strange, relief mixed with something that looked almost like suspicion. "Elena, how are you feeling? Any pain?" I tried to speak but could only manage a croak. My throat felt raw, my body weak. But more than that, something felt fundamentally wrong. When I tried to shift position, sharp pains shot through my lower back and abdomen. "The surgery went well," Dr. Chen said carefully, watching my face. "You had significant internal injuries from the fall. We had to make some difficult decisions while you were unconscious." "Surgery?" I didn't remember anyone mentioning surgery. Before the accident, my medical training kicked in as I mentally cataloged my symptoms. The pain patterns were all wrong for typical trauma surgery. These felt more like, "What kind of surgery?" I managed to whisper if Marcus squeezed my hand tighter. "Don't worry about that now, baby. Just focus on getting better." But Dr. Chen's expression told a different story. "Elena, we need to discuss, she needs rest," Marcus interrupted firmly. The doctors said not to overwhelm her with too much information at once. Over the next 2 days, I noticed things. Small things that my medical background made impossible to ignore. The way nurses avoided direct eye contact when they changed my bandages. The hushed conversations that stopped when I was awake. The fact that my blood work was being done twice daily, far more frequently than necessary for my supposed injuries. Most disturbing of all was Marcus himself. While he maintained his devoted husband act whenever medical staff were present, I caught glimpses of something else during our private moments. He seemed anxious, constantly checking his phone, making quiet phone calls in the hallway that he claimed were to his office. "Who keeps calling you?" I asked on Thursday morning after he returned from his third mysterious conversation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Just work stuff," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." That afternoon, while Marcus was supposedly getting coffee, Dr. Chen appeared alone in my room. She closed the door and moved her chair close to my bed. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Did you ever sign any documents about organ donation? Any advanced directives beyond what's in your medical file?" The question sent ice through my veins. "Patricia, what are you talking about? Why would you?" "There are some discrepancies in your medical records," she said quietly. "Some documentation that doesn't match what I remember about your case. And your post-operative labs are unusual." I struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain. "Show me my chart." "Elena, I can't, I'm a doctor, Patricia. I have a right to understand my own medical condition." "What aren't you telling me?" She hesitated, then pulled out a tablet. Your kidney function is significantly impaired. More than it should be given your injuries. And there are surgical notes that. She paused, clearly struggling. Elena, according to these records, you consented to emergency organ procurement while unconscious. The room started spinning. That's impossible. I never signed anything like that. And Marcus wouldn't have. Your husband is listed as your medical power of attorney. He signed the consent forms 3 days after your accident. My blood pressure monitor started beeping frantically as the implications hit me. Marcus had legal authority to make medical decisions if I was incapacitated. But organ procurement? From a living patient? Patricia, I need to see those surgical notes. All of them. She glanced nervously at the door. Elena, there's something else. The FBI contacted the hospital yesterday. They're investigating irregularities in our organ transplant program. Before I could respond, the door opened and Marcus walked in with 2 cups of coffee. His smile faltered when he saw Dr. Chen's tablet and our serious expressions. Is everything okay? Patricia, you look pale. We were just discussing Elena's recovery timeline, Dr. Chen said smoothly, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Marcus set down the coffee and moved to my bedside. How are you feeling, sweetheart? You look tired. I studied his face. The face I'd loved for 7 years, the face I'd thought I knew better than my own. Marcus, I need to ask you something about my surgery. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear? Guilt? What about it? Dr. Chen says you signed consent forms. For organ procurement. What does that mean exactly? The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Marcus glanced at Dr. Chen, then back at me. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Elena, you were dying. The doctor said you might not make it. I had to make impossible decisions to save your life. What decisions, Marcus? He took my hand, but his touch felt cold now. They needed to remove your damaged kidney. It was that or watch you die of organ failure. I pulled my hand away. 1 kidney. Elena, please don't upset yourself. You're still recovering. How many organs, Marcus? The question hung in the air like a sword. Dr. Chen was staring at Marcus with obvious suspicion now. Through the door's window, I could see hospital security talking to 2 people in dark suits who definitely didn't look like medical personnel. Marcus followed my gaze and went pale. I should probably call my lawyer, he said quietly. That's when I knew. My husband, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me in sickness and in health, had literally tried to sell pieces of me while I lay helpless. The FBI agents were walking toward our room, and I was about to discover exactly how much of myself I'd lost during those 3 weeks of darkness. Agent Sarah Mitchell knocked on my hospital room door with the kind of authority that made even Marcus straighten his shoulders. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp green eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room in seconds. Dr. Vasquez? I'm Agent Mitchell, FBI. This is Agent Rodriguez. We'd like to speak with you about your recent medical procedures. Marcus stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in despite his obvious panic. My wife is still recovering from major trauma. Surely this can wait. Actually, sir, we'd like to speak with you as well. Agent Rodriguez, a stocky man with graying temples, produced a badge. Mr. Marcus Vasquez, correct? You're listed as having medical power of attorney for your wife. The way he said it made it sound like an accusation. Dr. Chen quietly excused herself, but not before giving me a meaningful look that said, I'll be right outside if you need me. The door closed with a soft click that seemed to echo through the suddenly suffocating room. Agent Mitchell pulled out a recording device. Dr. Vasquez, are you feeling well enough to answer some questions? You have the right to have an attorney present. I'm a doctor, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I understand my rights. What exactly is this about? We're investigating potential violations of the National Organ Transplant Act, she said, watching Marcus carefully. Specifically, allegations of organ trafficking involving patients at this hospital. Marcus went white. That's ridiculous. Elena needed emergency surgery to save her life. Everything was done legally, through proper medical channels. Agent Rodriguez consulted his notes. According to hospital records, Mrs. Vasquez underwent removal of 1 kidney, portions of her liver, and corneal tissue over a 3-day period. While unconscious. All procedures authorized by your signature. The room started spinning again. Portions of my liver? Corneal tissue? I instinctively reached up to touch my eyes, feeling for any differences I might have missed. Marcus, I whispered, what did you do? Elena, please, let me explain. The kidney we understand, Agent Mitchell continued, given your documented injuries. But the liver resection and corneal harvesting. She looked directly at me. Dr. Vasquez, as a medical professional, what would be your assessment of those procedures in a trauma patient? My medical training took over, providing clinical distance from the horror. Unnecessary. Potentially life-threatening. The liver regenerates, but removing portions from a trauma patient significantly increases complications. And corneal harvesting? I touched my face again. That's typically done post-mortem. Or from living donors with proper consent and screening. Agent Rodriguez added grimly. Marcus was backing toward the wall. You don't understand the situation. Elena was dying. The doctors said. Which doctors? Agent Mitchell's voice cut like a scalpel. Because we've reviewed the surgical team records. Dr. Patel, who performed the kidney removal, had no knowledge of the additional procedures. Dr. Singh, who did the liver resection, was told you'd provided full informed consent. The corneal surgeon, Dr. Kim, was led to believe your wife had previously agreed to donate upon brain death. Brain death? I struggled to sit up fully. I was never brain dead. I was in a medically induced coma for trauma recovery. We know. Agent Mitchell's expression softened slightly when she looked at me. Dr. Vasquez, we believe your husband may have misrepresented your condition to multiple surgical teams, obtaining consent for procedures under false pretenses. The monitors started beeping frantically as my heart rate spiked. A nurse rushed in, took one look at the federal agents and my distress, and began checking my vitals. I think that's enough for now, she said firmly to the agents. My patient needs, no. I grabbed her arm with surprising strength. I need to know. All of it. Agent Rodriguez pulled out a folder. Mr. Vasquez, we've traced several unusual financial transactions to accounts in your name. Large deposits totaling approximately $180,000 over the past month. Can you explain these? Marcus's face crumpled. I can explain everything. Elena, you have to understand, we were drowning in debt. Your medical school loans, the house payments, my firm's financial troubles. When the accident happened and they said you might not make it, you saw an opportunity, I finished, the words tasting like poison. The black market contact approached me, he said desperately. Someone who knew about our financial situation. They said it was a way to help other people while solving our problems. They made it sound almost noble. Agent Mitchell leaned forward. Who approached you, Mr. Vasquez? I don't know his real name. He called himself Victor. Said he worked with families in situations like ours. When Elena was stable but still unconscious, he explained how we could help people on transplant waiting lists while getting enough money to pay off our debts. The nurse was injecting something into my probably a sedative, but I fought against the drowsiness. How much, Marcus? How much was I worth in pieces? Elena, please, how much? He flinched. Kidney was $60,000. Liver portions were $80,000. Corneas were $40,000 total. Agent Rodriguez was taking notes rapidly. And this Victor person facilitated all the transactions? He had connections with private surgical teams. Said they could perform the procedures during Elena's regular treatment, make it look like necessary medical intervention. I stared at this stranger wearing my husband's face. You sold my sight, Marcus. My ability to see our future children, to watch sunsets, to look at you with love. You sold that for $40,000. The corneas regenerate, he said weakly. Victor said, corneas don't regenerate. I screamed, my medical knowledge cutting through his lies. You sold my corneas. I could have gone blind. Agent Mitchell stood up. Mr. Vasquez, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit organ trafficking, fraud, and endangering the welfare of another person. As Agent Rodriguez began reading Marcus's rights, he kept looking at me with desperate eyes. Elena, I thought you were going to die anyway. The doctors weren't sure you'd wake up. I thought. I thought maybe some good could come from, get out. My voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute finality. Get out of my sight. As they led Marcus away in handcuffs, Agent Mitchell remained behind. Dr. Vasquez, I know this is overwhelming. But we need your help to build a case against the trafficking network. Victor isn't his real name, and your husband was just one of several people they've approached. Other patients? At least 6 cases we know of in the past 2 years. Vulnerable families, financial desperation, patients in compromised positions. She sat down again. You're the first victim who survived and was in a position to testify. The sedative was making me drowsy, but I forced myself to focus. The surgical teams, are they involved? We don't think so. The network was sophisticated. They researched your husband's financial situation, knew about your medical background, even knew which doctors would be on duty when. They positioned themselves as facilitating legitimate medical procedures. Dr. Chen knocked and entered, looking shaken. Elena, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. When I reviewed the surgical notes after your husband was arrested, I found discrepancies in the documentation. Some of the consent forms were clearly forged. Forged how? Your signature was copied from medical documents in your file. The dates and times were manipulated to make it appear you'd provided advance consent for living organ donation. Agent Mitchell pulled out her phone. Dr. Vasquez, we have Victor, whose real name is Alexei Petrov, under surveillance. He's planning to approach another family tomorrow. A car accident victim in Phoenix whose husband is facing bankruptcy. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. You want me to help you catch him? We want you to help us save other families from going through what you've experienced. I looked down at my hands, thinking about the husband who'd sold pieces of me like used car parts. About other women lying unconscious while their loved ones weighed their lives against dollar amounts. What do you need me to do? For now, recover. Get stronger. We'll need your testimony eventually, but first we need to gather more evidence. Agent Mitchell handed me her card. Dr. Chen will be monitoring your condition closely. The good news is that your remaining kidney is functioning well, your liver is regenerating as expected, and your corneal damage was minimal. After they left, I lay in the dark trying to process everything. My husband was in federal custody. Parts of my body had been sold on the black market. I was alive, but fundamentally changed in ways that went far beyond the physical. Dr. Chen returned with my latest lab results. Kidney function is improving daily. Liver enzymes are normalizing. You're going to make a full recovery, Elena. What about my eyes? She sat down carefully. There was some corneal damage, but it appears the harvesting was interrupted, probably when the FBI investigation began. Your vision should be largely unaffected. I closed my eyes, feeling tears leak from the corners. Patricia, how could I not know? 7 years of marriage, and I had no idea what kind of person he really was. Desperation makes people do terrible things, she said softly. But Elena, you need to know something else. When you were unconscious, Marcus asked me several times about your prognosis. He seemed genuinely concerned about your recovery. You think he actually cared? I think he convinced himself he was doing the right thing. That doesn't excuse it, but it might explain how someone you loved could. She trailed off. Could sell me for parts? She nodded sadly. That night, I dreamed about waking up blind and missing organs, about Marcus counting money while I lay dying. I dreamed about other women in other hospitals, other husbands faced with impossible choices. When I woke up, I knew what I had to do. Agent Mitchell was right, I was the first victim in a position to fight back. And I was going to make sure. Alexei Petrov and his network never destroyed another family. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the FBI field office conference room, surrounded by white boards covered in photographs, financial records, and red string connecting various suspects. Agent Mitchell had been right about one thing: this was much bigger than Marcus and me. Dr. Vasquez, meet Detective Lisa Park from Phoenix PD, Agent Rodriguez said, gesturing to a woman with tired eyes and a grim expression. She's been investigating similar cases on the West Coast. Detective Park slid a folder across the table. 3 families in the past 18 months. All approached by someone calling himself Victor. All facing financial crises. All with family members in vulnerable medical situations. I opened the folder, immediately regretting it. The first photograph showed a young mother, maybe 25, connected to life support machines. The notation read, Sarah Chen, 26, complications from childbirth. Husband convinced to authorize experimental treatments that included liver resection and bone marrow harvesting. Did she survive? Barely. Like you, she woke up to discover what had happened. Unlike you, her husband took his own life before we could arrest him. The second case file was worse. An elderly man with dementia whose adult son had been convinced. The procedures were part of an experimental treatment program. The third was a teenager injured in a motorcycle accident. The pattern is consistent, Agent Mitchell explained, pointing to a timeline on the whiteboard. Petrov identifies vulnerable families through his network of contacts, hospital orderlies, financial advisors, even some social workers. He researches their situations thoroughly before making contact. How does he get past hospital security? I asked, studying the organizational chart they'd created. Detective Park pulled out another file. That's where it gets sophisticated. He's not working alone. We've identified at least 12 people in his network, including surgical coordinators who can arrange procedures, administrators who can falsify paperwork, and transporters who move the organs to buyers. Agent Rodriguez pointed to a cluster of photos on the board. Meet Dr. Amanda Foster, surgical coordinator at 3 different hospitals. She's the one who arranged for your procedures to happen during shift changes, when oversight was minimal. I studied the woman's photo, mid-40s, professional-looking, the kind of person you'd trust completely in a medical setting. She's a doctor? Former doctor. Lost her license 5 years ago for insurance fraud. But she still has contacts throughout the medical community. And the buyers? I forced myself to ask, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know who had pieces of my body. Agent Mitchell hesitated. That's complicated. Some go to legitimate patients who've been waiting on transplant lists for years. Others. She paused. Others go to wealthy individuals who want to skip the normal waiting process. The thought that my kidney might be functioning inside some millionaire who'd bought his way to the front of the line made my stomach turn. But what was worse was imagining desperate patients receiving black market organs, not knowing the circumstances of how they were obtained. There's something else, Detective Park said quietly. We think Petrov is planning to disappear. Intelligence suggests he's made enough money to retire and relocate somewhere without an extradition treaty. When? Soon. Maybe within the week. Which is why we need to move fast. Agent Rodriguez pulled up a surveillance photo on his laptop. This was taken yesterday outside a coffee shop in Scottsdale. Petrov meeting with David Kim, whose wife was injured in a hit-and-run last month. The photo showed a man in his 50s, expensively dressed, leaning across a small table toward a younger Asian man who looked exhausted and desperate. Even in the grainy surveillance image, I could see the predatory nature of the interaction. Kim's wife is in a coma, Agent Mitchell explained. Severe traumatic brain injury. The doctors are cautiously optimistic, but recovery could take months. Kim lost his job last week. He'd been missing too much work to stay at the hospital. I stared at the photo, seeing Marcus and David Kim's slumped shoulders and desperate expression. What's Petrov offering him? Initial contact was just financial assistance. Help with medical bills, temporary housing, that kind of thing. He presents himself as representing a charitable foundation that helps families in medical crises. But it's a setup. Exactly. Once the family becomes dependent on his help, he starts introducing the idea of medical procedures that could benefit others, while providing additional financial relief. Detective Park opened her laptop and pulled up a recording. We've been monitoring Kim's phone since Petrov made contact. This is from yesterday's conversation. Petrov's voice filled the room, smooth and sympathetic with just a hint of an Eastern European accent. David, I understand how difficult this must be. Watching someone you love in that condition, not knowing if they'll ever wake up. It's devastating. Kim's voice was barely a whisper. The doctors say there's still hope, but the bills. I don't know how much longer I can keep up the payments. That's exactly why our foundation exists. We've helped dozens of families in situations just like yours. There are ways to ensure your wife gets the best possible care while also helping other patients who desperately need what she might be able to provide. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, Petrov carefully planting seeds without making any direct offers. It was masterfully manipulative. He never mentioned organ harvesting, but instead spoke about helping others and making something positive from tragedy. He's good, I admitted grudgingly. He's had practice, Agent Mitchell said. We've traced his network back at least 5 years. Dozens of victims across multiple states. I thought about Marcus sitting in his jail cell, probably still believing he'd made a noble sacrifice. Has my husband been helpful in your investigation? Agent Rodriguez exchanged a look with his partner. He's been cooperative. But Dr. Vasquez? You should know that his story keeps changing. First, he claimed Petrov approached him. Then he admitted he'd actually sought out options for financial assistance online. What do you mean? There are forums, dark websites where people in desperate situations share information about alternative solutions. Marcus found one of these sites and posted about your situation. Petrov contacted him through that channel. The betrayal kept getting deeper. It wasn't just that Marcus had agreed to sell my organs, he'd actively sought out ways to do it. He'd shopped around my unconscious body like a commodity. Detective Park leaned forward. Dr. Vasquez, we want to use you to get to Petrov directly. How? Agent Mitchell pulled out a phone and tablet. You're going to contact David Kim. As a fellow victim, someone who's been through exactly what he's facing. You're going to warn him about Petrov. And when Petrov finds out I'm alive and talking, he'll have to respond. Either he'll try to discredit you, or he'll make a move that exposes more of his network. Either way, we'll be ready. I considered the plan. It was risky. Petrov had already demonstrated he was willing to convince people to mutilate their unconscious loved ones for money. If he felt threatened, there was no telling what he might do. What about protective custody? For me and for the Kim family? Already arranged. But Dr. Vasquez, you need to understand that once we do this, once you go public as a victim, your privacy is gone. This case will likely become national news. I thought about my medical career, my reputation, the colleagues who would learn that my husband had sold my organs. But then I thought about David Kim, sitting beside his wife's hospital bed, probably getting another sympathetic call from Petrov right now. What do you need me to do? Agent Mitchell handed me a script. Call Kim directly. Tell him you're a doctor who was victimized by someone calling himself Victor. Don't mention the FBI investigation, we want this to seem like you're reaching out on your own. I dialed the number with shaking hands. After 3 rings, a tired voice answered. Hello? Mr. Kim? This is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I got your number from someone who thought I should talk to you about a man named Victor. Silence on the other end. Mr. Kim? Are you there? Who is this really? I'm a doctor in Denver. 3 weeks ago, I was in a coma after a skiing accident. A man calling himself Victor convinced my husband to authorize surgical procedures that weren't medically necessary. He sold parts of my body on the black market. I could hear Kim's sharp intake of breath. Mr. Kim, if Victor has contacted you, please listen to me. He's not trying to help your family. He's trying to use your wife's condition to make money. Whatever he's promised you, whatever he's said about helping other patients, it's a lie. I don't know what you're talking about. But his voice betrayed him. The fear, the recognition, the horrible understanding that the lifeline he'd been offered was actually a noose. He probably told you about a charitable foundation, right? About ways to help other families while getting financial assistance for your wife's care? Who are you really? I'm someone who woke up missing a kidney and parts of my liver because my husband thought he was saving our family from bankruptcy. Mr. Kim, whatever Victor has told you, whatever papers he's asked you to sign, please don't do it. Your wife's life is worth more than any amount of money. The line went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Mr. Kim? He said there were experimental treatments that could help her recover faster. That other patients desperately needed what she could provide. He made it sound like you'd be helping people while helping yourself. I know. That's exactly what he told my husband. But you survived? Barely. And I'll live with the consequences for the rest of my life. But Mr. Kim, your wife could die if you let Victor anywhere near her medical care. I could hear him crying softly on the other end of the line. What should I do? Agent Mitchell was nodding encouragingly. giving me a thumbs up. First, don't sign anything Victor gives you. Second, contact the FBI immediately. Agent Sarah Mitchell in Denver. Tell her I sent you. Will they help with the medical bills? The question broke my heart because I knew the FBI couldn't solve David Kim's financial crisis. They could only prevent him from making the same devastating mistake Marcus had made. I don't know about the bills, Mr. Kim. But I know that losing your wife forever isn't worth any amount of money. After I hung up, the room was silent. Agent Mitchell was already on her phone, presumably alerting the Phoenix field office to expect Kim's call. Good work, Dr. Vasquez, Agent Rodriguez said. Now we wait and see how Petrov responds. I leaned back in my chair, emotionally drained. What if Kim decides to go through with it anyway? What if the financial pressure is too much? Then we'll arrest Petrov the moment he shows up at the hospital, Detective Park said firmly. Either way, this ends soon. As we prepared to leave, Agent Mitchell pulled me aside. Dr. Vasquez, there's something else you should know. We've been monitoring Marcus's communications from jail. He's been trying to contact you. I don't want to talk to him. I understand. But he's also been asking about protective custody for you. It seems like he's genuinely concerned about your safety once Petrov learns you're cooperating with us. I stared at her, trying to process this information. Even after everything he'd done, Marcus was still worried about me. It should have been touching, but instead it just made everything more confusing. He made his choice when he decided I was worth more in pieces than whole, I said finally, but as I left the FBI office, I couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous part of this operation was still ahead of us. Petrov had built a sophisticated network over years of careful planning. He wouldn't go down without a fight, and something told me that fight was about to get very personal. The safe house was a nondescript two-story colonial in a suburban Denver neighborhood, the kind of place where soccer moms drove minivans and nobody looked twice at unfamiliar faces. I'd been there for 3 days when Agent Mitchell arrived with news that made my blood run cold. David Kim is dead, she said without preamble, settling into the armchair across from my temporary living room. Apparent suicide. Phoenix PD found him in his garage this morning. I set down my coffee cup with trembling hands. Because of my call? We don't think so. The timeline doesn't work. Kim contacted our Phoenix office immediately after talking to you, just like you suggested. He was scheduled for protective custody today. Agent Mitchell's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. Someone got to him first. Petrov? Almost certainly. Kim's wife died 2 hours before he did. Officially from complications related to her brain injury. Unofficially. She paused, consulting her notes. The attending physician reported sudden, unexplained organ failure. Multiple systems shutting down simultaneously. The implication hit me like a physical blow. They killed her and made it look natural. That's our working theory. Kim probably realized what was happening, what he'd agreed to, and couldn't live with the guilt. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the ordinary suburban street where ordinary people lived ordinary lives without organ traffickers trying to murder them. So Petrov knows I'm alive. He knows I'm talking to the FBI. We have to assume so. Which is why you're staying here until we can bring him in. Any leads on his location? Agent Mitchell's expression darkened. He's gone to ground. Disappeared. From his usual haunts, stopped using his known phone numbers. But Dr. Vasquez, there's something else. I turned from the window, dreading whatever she was about to tell me. We intercepted communications suggesting that Petrov has ordered a hit on you. The price on your head is $500,000. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the back of the couch for support. $500,000? For killing a trauma surgeon in protective custody? You're not just any surgeon now. You're the only surviving victim who can testify against his entire operation. Without your testimony, most of our case falls apart. What about the other victims? Dead, too traumatized to testify coherently, or, she hesitated. Or like Sarah Chen, too afraid to come forward after what happened to her husband. I slumped back onto the couch. So it's just me. For now. But Elena, there's something you need to know about the hit order. It didn't come through Petrov's usual channels. What do you mean? Agent Mitchell pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. These were intercepted from a burner phone registered to someone called the surgeon. Ring any bells? I read the messages, my confusion growing with each line. The language was clinical, precise, almost medical in its terminology. References to removing the problem and clean extraction and ensuring no complications. This person knows medical terminology. That's what we thought too. Elena, we think Petrov has someone inside the medical community working with him. Someone with surgical training. The possibility sent ice through my veins. You think it's someone I know? We think it's someone who knows you. The messages reference your specific injuries, your recovery timeline, even details about your medical training that wouldn't be in any public records. I thought about the doctors and nurses who treated me, the colleagues who'd visited during my recovery, the friends who knew about my situation. Any one of them could be feeding information to Petrov. There's more, Agent Mitchell continued. The surgeon requested something unusual in addition to the hit order. They want access to your medical records, your current health status, and… She paused. Your current location. They want to finish the job, I realized. Take whatever organs they missed the first time. That's our assessment. Which means whoever this is, they're not just planning to kill you. They're planning to harvest you. The doorbell rang, and both Agent Mitchell and I froze. Through the window, I could see a delivery truck and a man in a brown uniform holding a package. Agent Mitchell was already on her radio. Control, we have an unscheduled delivery at the safe house. Please advise. The response crackled back, no delivery scheduled. Consider it hostile. Agent Mitchell drew her weapon and motioned for me to get down. Through the window, I watched the delivery man set the package on the porch and walk back to his truck. But something was wrong with his gait, too smooth, too controlled, like someone with medical training who knew how to move efficiently. He's not a real delivery driver, I whispered. The package on the porch was small, rectangular, wrapped in brown paper. No shipping labels that I could see from this angle. Agent Mitchell was speaking rapidly into her radio, calling for backup and bomb disposal. But I was focused on the truck, which had stopped at the end of the block instead of driving away. Keys. Watching, I said. Waiting to see what happens. Elena, get away from the windows. Now. But as I moved toward the back of the house, I caught a glimpse of the driver's profile. Something familiar about the shape of his head, the way he held his shoulders. Oh my God, I breathed. What? I know him. The driver. It's Dr. James Wu from St. Michael's. He was part of my surgical team during my residency. Agent Mitchell was already on the phone with the hospital. St. Michael's Medical Center? I need to speak with your administrator about Dr. James Wu. What do you mean he's on leave? Through the radio chatter and phone conversations, I pieced together the truth. Dr. Wu had taken an extended leave of absence 3 weeks ago, citing family emergency. His medical license was still active, his credentials legitimate, his access to hospital systems and patient records intact. He's been inside the system all along, I said, the pieces falling into place. He probably helped coordinate my original surgeries, made sure the right people were on duty, arranged for the procedures to happen during shift changes. The surgeon, Agent Mitchell, confirmed grimly. The bomb disposal team arrived 20 minutes later, approaching the package with robotic precision. But when they opened it, instead of explosives, they found something far more disturbing. Medical supplies, the team leader reported over the radio. Surgical instruments, preservation solution, and what appears to be organ transport containers. Agent Mitchell's face went pale. He wasn't planning to blow up the house. He was planning to perform surgery here. The delivery truck was gone by the time backup arrived, but traffic cameras had captured the license plate. Within an hour, we had Dr. Wu's real name, address, and complete background. James Wu, 45, divorced, no children, Agent Mitchell read from her tablet as we sat in the FBI field office. Brilliant surgeon, exemplary record until about 2 years ago when his mother required a kidney transplant. Let me guess, she didn't qualify for the regular transplant list. Correct. Too old, too many comorbidities. Wu tried everything through legitimate channels, but she died waiting. So he turned to the black market. First as a buyer, then as a seller. We think Petrov recruited him after Wu successfully purchased a kidney for another patient, his then-girlfriend's daughter. Wu had the medical skills Petrov needed to make the operations look legitimate. I thought about James Wu, remembering him as a dedicated surgeon who'd saved countless lives during my residency. The transformation from healer to predator was almost harder to believe than Marcus's betrayal. Where is he now? Unknown. But Elena, we intercepted another message from his phone. He's planning to finish what he started with you, but not here. In Denver. He wants to take you somewhere more private, more controlled. Like an operating room. Like the abandoned medical facility we've been tracking. Petrov's network has been using decommissioned hospitals and clinics for their operations. Remote locations where they can work without interruption. Agent Rodriguez joined us, carrying a thick file. We found it. Closed psychiatric hospital about 2 hours outside the city. Recent purchases of medical equipment delivered to that address, all paid for with funds traced back to Petrov's network. They're setting up for major surgery, I realized. Not just organ harvesting, but full surgical procedures. Operating rooms, recovery facilities, the works. Agent Mitchell nodded. Dr. Vasquez, we think they're planning to stage your kidnapping. Make it look like you were taken from protective custody, transport you to their facility, and then. She didn't need to finish. How long do we have? Wu's messages suggest they're moving tonight. But here's the thing, we think this might be our best chance to take down the entire network. If we can catch them in the act, with the facility fully operational and Wu performing surgery, we'll have enough evidence to prosecute everyone involved. You want to use me as bait? We want to give you the choice. You can stay in protective custody until we find another way to get Petrov, which could take months or years. Or you can help us end this tonight. I thought about David Kim and his wife, about Sarah Chen waking up to discover her husband's suicide, about all the future victims who would suffer if Petrov's network continued operating. What would I have to do? Agent Rodriguez spread blueprints across the table. The abandoned hospital has 3 main buildings. We think they've set up their primary operating rooms in the central building, administrative offices in the east wing, and recovery facilities in the west wing. Recovery facilities for what? For victims who survive the harvesting but need time to heal before being disposed of. The casual way he said "disposed of" made my stomach turn. How many people are we talking about? Agent Mitchell consulted her notes. Thermal imaging suggests at least 12 people currently in the facility. Some are probably medical staff, but others. She trailed off. Other victims. We think so. Elena, if we're right, tonight isn't just about stopping Wu and Petrov. It's about rescuing people who are being held against their will. I stared at the blueprints, imagining terrified patients trapped in that abandoned hospital while monsters in surgical masks decided which pieces of them were worth the most money. Tell me the plan. For the next 2 hours, we rehearsed every detail. I would be transported to a secondary safe house, where Wu's people would be allowed to kidnap me. FBI agents would be tracking my location every step of the way, ready to move in once we had enough evidence to prosecute. The risk is significant, Agent Mitchell warned me for the dozenth time. If something goes wrong, if Wu decides to operate immediately instead of waiting for Petrov's arrival, we might not be able to reach you in time. And if I say no? We'll find another way. Eventually. How many more people will die while you're looking for another way? She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. As night fell over Denver, I put on the tracking devices, reviewed the emergency signals, and prepared to walk voluntarily into the hands of people who'd already tried to sell my organs once, but this time, I wouldn't be unconscious. This time, I'd be ready to fight back. The van smelled like disinfectant and fear. I lay on the metal floor, hands zip-tied behind my back, watching the ceiling lights flicker past through the small windows. The tracking device was embedded in the sole of my shoe, invisible but hopefully functional. Agent Mitchell's voice echoed. In my head, stay calm, stay aware, and trust that we're coming for you. Doctor Wu sat across from me, no longer bothering with his delivery driver disguise. In his medical scrubs, he looked like the colleague I'd once respected, which somehow made this worse. Monsters should look monstrous, not like people you trusted with patients' lives. I'm sorry it's come to this, Elena, he said, checking the 4-line he'd inserted in my arm. But you forced our hand by involving the FBI. The sedative was making Me drowsy, but I fought to stay alert. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become, James. His jaw tightened. My mother died because people like you think there are rules about who deserves to live. She was a brilliant woman, a retired teacher who helped thousands of children. But she was 68 with diabetes, so she didn't qualify for the transplant list. So you decided to take organs from unconscious patients? I decided to create a system where people could make their own choices about their medical care. Elena, you've seen the waste in our system. Perfectly good organs discarded because of bureaucratic nonsense. People dying on waiting lists while others live in comas with no hope of recovery. The van hit a pothole, and I bit my tongue to keep from crying out as pain shot through my healing incisions. Those people in comas have families who love them. Families drowning in medical debt. Families watching their loved ones suffer with no hope of improvement. We offer them a way out. You offer them blood money. Wu leaned forward, his voice taking on the passionate tone I remembered from medical conferences. Do you know how much money the average family spends on end-of-life care? $200,000. $300,000. Sometimes more. We offer them half that amount to help people who can actually benefit. By murdering patients. By helping them transition peacefully while giving meaning to their deaths. Elena, every organ we've harvested has saved lives. The kidney we took from you is functioning perfectly in a 16-year-old girl who would have died without it. Despite everything, that information hit me like a physical blow. Somewhere, a teenager was alive because of my kidney. The moral complexity was staggering. Wu was a monster, but that girl was innocent. What about the corneas? The liver tissue? A burn victim regained his sight. A child with Wilson's disease got a chance at a normal life. Elena, you've saved more people in the past month than most surgeons save in their entire careers. The van was slowing down. Through the windows, I could see the silhouette of a large building against the night sky. The abandoned psychiatric hospital looked like something from a horror movie: broken windows, crumbling brick, dead trees surrounding the perimeter. How many victims are inside, James? Victims? Wu seemed genuinely puzzled. Elena, they're patients. People whose families chose to help others instead of prolonging suffering. People whose families were manipulated by Petrov's lies. Alexei provides a service. He identifies families in crisis and offers them alternatives. No one is forced to participate. The van stopped, and I heard footsteps approaching. The rear doors opened, revealing two men in medical scrubs. One was young, nervous-looking, probably a medical student or resident. The other was older, with the confident bearing of an experienced surgeon. Dr. Foster, Wu said to the older man. Meet our special patient. Dr. Amanda Foster, the surgical coordinator Agent Mitchell had mentioned. Up close, she looked tired, worn down by years of illegal activities. But her hands were steady as she checked my foreline. Vitals are stable, she reported. Though I'm concerned about her recent surgical history. The healing process isn't complete. That's why we're taking her 2 or 3, Wu replied. Full surgical suite, proper equipment. This won't be some back alley procedure. They transferred me to a wheelchair and rolled me through the hospital's loading dock. The interior was a bizarre combination of decay and high-tech medical equipment. The walls were crumbling, but the hallways were lined with modern surgical equipment still in shipping boxes. Impressive setup, I managed to say through the sedative haze. Alexei spared no expense, Wu said proudly. 3 fully equipped operating rooms, recovery facilities, even a small laboratory for tissue typing and organ preservation. We passed through a ward where I glimpsed other patients, people lying unconscious in hospital beds, connected to monitors and IVs. Some looked elderly, others were younger. All appeared to be in comas or heavily sedated. How long have they been here? That depends, Dr. Foster answered. Some are recent arrivals, like the young mother from last week. Others have been here longer, waiting for the right match. Waiting to be carved up, you mean? Wu stopped the wheelchair abruptly. Elena, I understand you're angry. But look around you. This is a medical facility providing care to people who have nowhere else to turn. Their families couldn't afford the treatments they needed. We've given them an alternative. You've given them a death sentence. We've given them purpose. Every person here will save multiple lives through organ donation. That's more than most people accomplish in their entire lifetimes. Or 3 was fully functional, bright surgical lights, modern anesthesia equipment, even a heart-lung machine in case they needed to keep organs viable during complex harvesting procedures. It looked exactly like the operating rooms at St. Michael's, which made the situation even more surreal. Dr. Vasquez, a familiar voice said from the doorway. I'm disappointed it's come to this. Alexei Petrov entered the room, looking nothing like the predatory monster I'd imagined. He was average height, well-dressed in an expensive suit, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He could have been anyone's grandfather. You're not what I expected, I said. Most people say that. They expect someone who looks evil, someone obviously dangerous. But Elena, I'm a businessman providing a service that benefits everyone involved. Everyone except the patients you're murdering. Petrov pulled up a chair and sat down beside my gurney. Tell me, as a trauma surgeon, how many patients have you watched die because suitable organs weren't available? The question caught me off guard. The answer was dozens, maybe hundreds over my career. And how many times have you seen families bankrupted by medical bills, forced to choose between saving their loved one and saving themselves financially? Again, too many to count. I solve both problems simultaneously. Families get financial relief, patients get organs, and yes, some people die. But they die peacefully, with dignity, knowing their deaths have meaning. You're insane. I'm practical. Elena, the traditional medical system is failing. Transplant waiting lists that take years. Insurance companies that deny coverage for experimental treatments. Hospitals that charge $200 for aspirin. I've created an alternative. Dr. Foster was preparing surgical instruments. While we talked, the young resident, his name tag read Dr. Chen, was setting up the anesthesia equipment. Where did you find them? I asked Petrov, nodding toward the medical staff. What kind of doctors agree to participate in this? The same kind who became doctors in the first place, people who want to save lives. Dr. Foster lost her license over a paperwork technicality. Dr. Chen has $400,000 in student loans and no hope of a residency position because of one mistake in medical school. I gave them a chance to practice medicine again. Illegal medicine. Effective medicine. Elena, we've saved over 200 lives in the past 3 years. The traditional medical system would have let all those patients die while waiting for organs that never came. Wu was reviewing my chart, making notes about which organs could be harvested. The remaining kidney is fully functional. Liver regeneration is excellent, we can take another lobe. Heart and lungs appear perfect. Even the corneal damage from the previous harvesting has healed well. You're talking about me like I'm already dead. You're talking like someone who doesn't understand the bigger picture, Petrov replied calmly. Elena, your organs will save at least 6 people. 6 families. Who won't have to watch their loved ones die. 6 success stories instead of 1 tragedy. Dr. Foster finished her prep work and turned to Petrov. Sir, there's something you should know. The patient has been cooperative with federal authorities. It's possible this facility has been compromised. I'm aware of that possibility, Petrov said. Which is why we're accelerating our timeline. Dr. Wu, how long for complete organ recovery? 4 to 6 hours, depending on complications. And then? We dispose of the remains and relocate. The FBI will find an empty building. The casual way they discussed my murder and dismemberment was almost as horrifying as the act itself. These people had rationalized their crimes so completely that they genuinely believed they were heroes. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Chen said quietly, approaching with a syringe, this will help you relax. I looked into his young face, seeing someone who probably started medical school with noble intentions. How old are you? 27. Do you have family? My parents, back in California. They're very proud that I became a doctor. What would they think if they knew what you're really doing here? His hand hesitated over the foreport. I'm saving lives. You're murdering innocent people. They're not innocent, Wu interjected. They're consumers of resources that could be better used elsewhere. Elena, that comatose teenager in room 12 has been unconscious for 8 months. Her family has spent their life savings keeping her alive with no hope of recovery. We're going to harvest her organs tomorrow and save 6 people. She's a child. She's a vegetable consuming resources that could save actual lives. The monitor attached to my force started beeping frantically as my heart rate spiked. Dr. Foster checked the readout and frowned. Her stress levels are too high for surgery. We need to wait for her to calm down. We don't have time, Petrov said. The FBI could be here any moment. If we operate while she's this agitated, we risk organ damage. The harvesting needs to be done under optimal conditions. Wu pulled out his phone and showed Petrov something on the screen. Sir, we have a problem. Thermal imaging shows vehicles approaching the perimeter. Multiple vehicles. Through the operating room windows, I could see lights in the distance. The FBI had found us. Petrov's calm demeanor cracked for the first time. How long do we have? Maybe 10 minutes before they reach the building. Then we do this fast and dirty. Dr. Wu, prep for emergency harvesting. Take what you can get and let's go. Wu was already reaching for a scalpel when the lights went out. In the darkness, I heard gunshots echoing through the hospital corridors. Shouts. Running footsteps. The sound of the FBI finally arriving to end this nightmare, but in the pitch-black operating room, I could still hear Wu moving around, searching for his instruments by feel. I'm not leaving empty-handed, he muttered. The cavalry had arrived. But they still had to find me before Wu decided to finish what he'd started with whatever tools he could find in the dark. The emergency lighting kicked in 30 seconds after the power died, bathing the operating room in an eerie red glow. Dr. Wu was still fumbling for his scalpel when the first explosion echoed through the hospital, flashbang grenades announcing the FBI's arrival. James, we need to go, Dr. Foster hissed, abandoning her surgical prep to grab a bag of medical supplies. The exit strategy, remember? But Wu was beyond reason now, his face twisted with desperate determination. 2 minutes. That's all I need. Just the kidney, I can have it out in 2 minutes. The FBI is in the building. Petrov snapped, his calm facade completely shattered. We leave now or we don't leave at all. Through the red-tinted darkness, I could see Dr. Chen backing toward the door, his young face pale with terror. The sound of tactical boots pounding through the corridors was getting closer. Wu raised the scalpel, and I did the only thing I could think of, I screamed. Not from fear, but with the full-throated power of someone who'd spent years commanding attention in trauma bays during life-or-death emergencies. Help! Operating room 3. They're trying to kill me. The sound echoed through the hospital like a siren. Wu's hand hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, Dr. Chen made his choice. The young resident grabbed Wu's wrist, stopping the scalpel just inches from my abdomen. Dr. Wu, stop. This is wrong. This was always wrong. Let go of me, David. She's going to destroy everything we've built here. Good. Dr. Chen's voice cracked with emotion. It should be destroyed. Look what we've become. The arguing gave me the distraction I needed. Despite the sedatives and my restraints, I managed to roll off the gurney and onto the floor. The impact sent waves of pain through my healing incisions. But it put the surgical table between me and Wu's scalpel. FBI. Hands where we can see them. Agent Mitchell's voice cut through the chaos as tactical lights flooded the operating room. Wu dropped the scalpel and raised his hands, but Petrov was already moving toward a door I hadn't noticed before, some kind of service exit behind the anesthesia equipment. Going somewhere, Alexei? Agent Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn. We've had the building surrounded for 20 minutes. Dr. Foster and Dr. Chen surrendered immediately, but Wu made one last desperate grab for the scalpel. Agent Mitchell's taser dropped him before he could reach it, his body convulsing as 50,000 volts coursed through him. As the tactical team secured the operating room, Agent Mitchell knelt beside me, quickly cutting through my restraints. Elena, are you hurt? Did they operate? No, I gasped, struggling to sit up. But James, there are other patients here. Other victims. They need immediate medical attention. We know. We've got teams sweeping every floor. Over the next hour, the abandoned hospital transformed into a massive crime scene. Paramedics wheeled out victim after victim, some unconscious, others barely alive, all requiring immediate transport to legitimate hospitals. The teenage girl Wu had mentioned was among them, along with an elderly man, 3 middle-aged patients, and others whose families had been convinced their loved ones were beyond help. 17 patients total, Agent Mitchell reported as we watched the last ambulance disappear into the night. All alive, though some will need extensive medical intervention to reverse the drugs they've been given. I was sitting in the back of my own ambulance, getting checked over by a paramedic who seemed baffled by my recent surgical history. "Ma'am, your medical records are unusual. It looks like you've had multiple organ harvesting procedures." "It's a long story," I replied, watching Wu being loaded into a police transport vehicle. Even in handcuffs, he was trying to argue with the officers about the humanitarian nature of his work. Dr. Chen sat in a separate police car, looking like a lost child. Through the window, I could see him crying as he spoke to a detective. Agent Rodriguez had mentioned that Chen was cooperating fully, providing details about the network's operations and victim selection process. "What happens to him?" I asked Agent Mitchell as she approached with a cup of coffee. "Chen? Probably plea bargain. He's young, clearly manipulated, and he did try to stop Wu from operating on you. His cooperation is helping us trace the full scope of Petrov's network." "And the others?" "Wu and Foster are looking at life sentences. Multiple counts of murder, organ trafficking, conspiracy, the works." "Petrov." She paused. "We found something interesting in his office." She handed me a tablet displaying financial records. "Over the past 3 years, Petrov's network has generated approximately $12 million in revenue. But Elena, look at how that money was distributed." I scanned the spreadsheet, confused by what I was seeing. "These numbers don't make sense. He's showing massive losses, not profits. Because he wasn't keeping the money. Most of it went to legitimate medical charities, children's hospitals, organ procurement organizations. Petrov was essentially running a Robin Hood operation, stealing from the desperate and giving to the needy." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. He really believed he was saving lives. The road to hell, right? "But Elena, this complicates the prosecution. His defense team is going to argue that he was operating a charitable foundation, not a criminal enterprise." I thought about the families who'd been manipulated, the patients who died, the moral complexity of a man who murdered people to fund legitimate medical care for others. What about the victims? Do their families know the truth now? We're in the process of notifying them. Some are devastated, they genuinely believed they were helping their loved ones transition peacefully. Others are relieved to learn their family members are still alive. "And Marcus?" Agent Mitchell's expression softened. "He's been asking about you constantly." "Elena, I know this is complicated, but he's been genuinely helpful in our investigation. His testimony was crucial in understanding how Petrov's people first made contact." I closed my eyes, trying to process the conflicting emotions. Anger at Marcus's betrayal, relief that the nightmare was over, confusion about the moral ambiguity of everything that had happened. "Can I see him?" "Are you sure?" "I need closure. I need to understand how someone I loved could." I trailed off. The Denver County Jail was a stark contrast to the abandoned hospital's gothic horror. Clean, sterile, bureaucratic. Marcus was waiting in a small conference room, dressed in an orange jumpsuit that made him look smaller somehow, diminished. "Elena." His voice broke when he saw me. "Thank God you're safe. When I heard about the hospital, about what Wu was planning, you were worried about me." The question came out harsher than I'd intended. "Of course I was worried. Elena, I know. What I did was unforgivable. I know I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. But I never stopped loving you." I sat down across from him, studying the face I'd once thought I knew completely. "Love isn't supposed to have a price tag, Marcus." "I know. I know that now. But when Petrov's people first contacted me, when they showed me how much we owed, how the medical bills were going to bankrupt us even if you recovered." He ran his hands through his hair. I panicked. "I made the worst decision of my life." "You made multiple decisions. Every time you signed consent forms, every time you authorized another procedure, you chose money over my life." "I chose financial survival over." He stopped, realizing how that sounded. "God, Elena, what kind of monster am I?" "I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out." We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "The FBI agent said you helped catch them. That you volunteered to be bait. Other people were going to die if I didn't. You could have been killed. I was already dead to you. You'd reduced me to spare parts." Marcus flinched as if I'd slapped him. Elena, if I could take it back, if I could undo everything, but you can't. And even if you could, Marcus, I'm not sure it would matter. Because now I know what you're capable of when you're scared. I know that your love for me has conditions. That's not true. Isn't it? You loved me when I was successful, when I was contributing financially to our relationship. But the moment I became a burden, the moment I became expensive, I stood up. You literally tried to sell me. I was trying to save us. You were trying to save yourself. The divorce papers were already drawn up by the time I left the jail. Our lawyer had worked quickly, taking advantage of Marcus's legal vulnerability to ensure I kept everything, the house, the investments, even his pension. It felt like a hollow victory. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the American Medical Association's annual conference, looking out at an audience of doctors, nurses, and medical administrators. The keynote address on medical ethics had been my idea, though I still wasn't sure I was the right person to deliver it. 3 months ago, I woke up from a coma to discover that my husband had authorized the harvesting of my organs while I was unconscious. Today, I want to talk about the ethical complexities of medical decision-making and the vulnerable populations we're meant to protect. The audience was completely silent. Word of my case had spread throughout the medical community, but this was my first public appearance since the trial. Dr. James Wu was a brilliant surgeon who convinced himself that murdering patients was a form of medical treatment. Alexei Petrov was a businessman who convinced himself that organ trafficking was charitable work. My husband Marcus was a desperate man who convinced himself that selling my body parts was financial planning. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Each of these men rationalized unconscionable acts by focusing on secondary benefits. Wu focused on the lives saved by transplanted organs. Petrov focused on the medical charities he funded. Marcus focused on our financial survival. None of them focused on the fundamental principle that should guide all medical decisions: first, do no harm. After the speech, a young resident approached me. She looked nervous, clutching a medical journal with my picture on the cover. Dr. Vasquez? I'm Sarah Kim, first-year resident at Johns Hopkins. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? For speaking out. For showing that victims can fight back. My aunt was one of Petrov's victims, she survived, and your testimony helped convict the people who hurt her. I signed her journal, thinking about all the families affected by this case. Wu, Foster, and Petrov had received life sentences. Dr. Chen got 10 years with possibility of parole for cooperation. Marcus received 5 years for conspiracy and fraud. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah continued, are you planning to return to surgery? I touched my abdomen, where the surgical scars had faded but would never completely disappear. I'm considering it. But maybe trauma surgery isn't the right fit anymore. What kind of medicine are you thinking about? I looked around the conference center, filled with medical professionals dedicated to healing, most of whom would never consider harming a patient for personal gain. Medical ethics, I said. Patient advocacy. Making sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. That evening, I returned to my hotel room and found a letter that had been slipped under my door. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Elena, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. But I needed you to know that I've been following the recovery of the patients we saved from Petrov's hospital. The 16-year-old who received your kidney is doing well. She's back in school, playing soccer, living a normal life. I know that doesn't justify what I did to you. Nothing ever could. But I thought you should know that your sacrifice, involuntary as it was, gave someone else a chance at life. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope that someday you can find peace with what happened. Marcus I read the letter twice, then walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, a teenage girl was alive because of my kidney. Somewhere else, Marcus was in prison. Probably still trying to convince himself that his motivations had been noble. The moral complexity hadn't gotten any simpler over the months. Wu had been a monster, but his stolen organs had genuinely saved lives. Petrov had been a criminal, but his profits had funded legitimate medical care. Marcus had betrayed me, but his decision had inadvertently helped a dying child. I folded the letter and put it in my purse. Tomorrow, I would begin the next phase of my life, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as someone who understood the dangerous gray areas where love, desperation, and good intentions could lead people into darkness, the girl with my kidney would never know my name. But because of her, because of the life she was living with my organ, I could finally find meaning in the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. Sometimes healing isn't about getting back what you lost. Sometimes it's about finding purpose in what you've gained through loss. I closed the curtains and went to sleep, dreaming not of operating rooms and organ traffickers, but of a teenage girl scoring goals with my kidney, living the life I'd unknowingly helped save. In the end, that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.